And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today's December 26th, the day after Christmas. And I hope everybody listening had a very Merry Christmas. Well, it's also the 360th day of the year. Just 5 days remain to the end of this year, and we get to start 2026. Hopefully it'll be a more peaceful year than 2025 has been. It's also National Thank You Note Day. Take a note to express gratitude with a handwritten message. That's just a very simple gesture that lets others know you appreciate them. National Candy Cane Day, Proclamation Day, and National Whiners Day. With a positive attitude, every challenge is an opportunity to grow. Life's too short wasted on complaining, though I know a lot of people who do. St. Stephen's Day, Boxing Day. After the holiday rush, it's a time to unwind and bond with family and friends, indulge in leftovers, or hit the stores for those discount sales. Zagreb Advent, Kwanzaa, uniting in cultural richness, illuminating principles like unity and purpose and creativity through vibrant rituals and meaningful gatherings. Christmas Bird Count Week, Artes Mundi, and of course, Blue Christmas, which will go on through December 31st. The famous people born in the state, Jared Leto. Now, that having been said, let's see what stories we have in the news for this December 26th. Well, President Trump announced a U.S. attack on ISIS in Nigeria. He called the strikes powerful and deadly. Christmas night airstrikes on ISIS, or what he called terrorist scum in Nigeria after the killing of Christians. He said the U.S. launched airstrikes in northwest Nigeria on Christmas night. Targeted ISIS militants he accused of killing Christians and calling the operation decisive, and warning further attacks would follow if the violence continued. He said, tonight, at my direction as Commander-in-Chief, the U.S. launched a powerful and deadly strike against ISIS terrorist scum in northwest Nigeria. They've been targeting and viciously killing primarily innocent Christians at levels not seen for many years, or even centuries. He said that Christmas night on Truth Social. He said, I've previously warned these terrorists if they didn't stop the slaughtering of Christians, there'd be hell to pay, and tonight there was. Department of War executed numerous perfect strikes, as only the United States is capable of doing. Well, he says that policy is going to continue unless the violence stops, so we'll see. Well, this November, Virginians elected a new governor with the largest margin in years for victory for a Democrat in modern history, in part because the individual in question had been focused above all on one big issue. That's affordability. The across Virginia, and the individual in question who became governor in November was Abigail Spanberger. She said across Virginia she heard from families in every community, in every part of the Commonwealth, about the impact of high cost. She met seniors struggling to afford prescription drugs, and parents worried about rising energy bills, and graduates just breaking into the workforce so they couldn't find housing that they could afford. Well, we'll see if this Virginia Democratic gubernatorial candidate, former Representative Abigail Spanberger, who was elected. Let's see if she keeps her word, or if She's going to go down the rabbit hole of so many other Democrats. Well, in the Christmas family photo of the Biden family, Joe Biden, the former president of the United States, is nearly invisible. He's in the back row. Hunter Biden takes center stage like he has ever since his father became president. Joe Biden shared this family photo on social media Christmas Eve, sparking online criticism after he appeared partially visible in the image while son Hunter stood front and center. The photo shows several members of the Biden family standing in front of a decorated Christmas tree, with Hunter positioned prominently in the foreground. Former First Lady Jill Biden also in the image, standing in front of the former president with her head partially obstructing his face. All the other family members appear fully framed and clearly visible. In the ex-post accompanying the image, Biden wrote, "Wishing you a peaceful and joyful Christmas Eve filled with joy." And if you didn't know it was the Biden family, you wouldn't recognize the former president. It was, there are 8 people in the photo, and everybody's clearly visible except the face of the former president. Well, the UPS plane crashed in Louisville. It claims its 15th victim weeks after the fiery takeoff failure. A man who severely injured in the crash of a UPS cargo plane in Louisville, Kentucky, has died more than 7 weeks after the crash, bringing the total number of fatalities from that crash to 15. Louisville Mayor Craig Greenberg identified the victim as Elaine Rodriguez Colina, saying that he died Thursday after suffering critical injuries in the crash. He posted on X Thursday evening, Christmas evening. Said it was great sadness. I just learned that Elaine Rodriguez Colina has passed, 15th victim of the UPS Flight 2976 accident. Suffered severe injuries at the time of the crash and passed away earlier this Christmas Day. May his memory be a blessing. Well, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear reacted to the updated death toll on X, urging people to pray for those families today and in the days and months and years to come, so they know they're not alone and they're loved. Been several crashes in recent years. You'd think air traffic would be much safer, but that's not the case. Well, I was talking yesterday about a widely prescribed opioid that actually shows minimal pain relief and higher heart risk, according to new studies. It's a widely prescribed opioid painkiller. Shows limited effectiveness and increased risk of negative effects in a new analysis published in BMJ Evidence-Based Medicine. Study examined tramadol, common prescription opioid used to treat chronic pain. It's widely prescribed. I know the VA seems to love tramadol, but it doesn't do a whole lot of good. Well, the president of the TP USA chapter, twice denied by the university's student government, vows to fight on, not backing down. The student at Loyola University in New Orleans, who's twice been denied the opportunity to start a Turning Point USA chapter on campus, vowed at the conservative organization's annual AmeriFest conference that she'd keep on fighting. Aniston Murray is a freshman at the Catholic school located in the heart of the Big Easy. She and 2 other would-be co-founders of the campus club have endured a months-long battle with the school's Student Government Association that insisted that Turning Point shouldn't have a presence on campus. On October 15th, the TPUSA students were first denied an official charter. Marie and her fellow founders then enlisted the help of Loyola New Orleans law students to draft an appeal. Said that the decision was subjective Most of it was subjective reasoning, according to law student Ethan Estes in an interview on Fox News. They didn't really rooted in any of the laws or rules or regulations they're supposed to follow, and it was purely subjective. And that was our basis and attack on the written appeal that we did. Well, you have to understand that a lot of these decisions are made emotionally. They're politically based. They don't have any basis in law. Well, Travis Kelce was held without a touchdown in the possible final home game as the Broncos narrowly beat the Chiefs. Had 3 of his 5 catches on the Kansas City Chiefs' final drive against the Denver Broncos, but the team couldn't do enough to win the game. Kelce, in what may have been his final game in Arrowhead Stadium before potentially calling it quits, had 5 catches for 36 yards. Denver won that game 20-13. Tight end threw his gloves to the crowd as he walked back to the locker room. Well, the Kansas City Chiefs offensive was pretty putrid the entire night, but the game came down to the wire. Chiefs suffered their first penalty of the night at the worst moment. The Broncos were lined up to go for it on the 4th and 2nd from Kansas City's 9-yard line. And as Bo Nix called the signals, Chief defensive lineman Chris Jones committed an offside penalty. And it gave the Broncos a fresh set of downs and a chance to deliver the dagger to the hearts of the Chiefs fans. Well, Kelce's name was in the news for quite some time, being the main squeeze of the one and only Taylor Swift. Well, Nebraska grandfather was killed in a freak accident at a McDonald's drive-thru. Killed just days before Christmas, what officials have described as a freak accident. Michael Dickinson, 69, was crushed to death after he was pinned between his vehicle and the payment window on Thursday morning in Grand Island. He was rushed to the local hospital and was pronounced dead, according to the Grand Island police. Police said the victim's next of kin were notified of his death. According to the police chief, Dean Elliott, the incident was 100% a freak accident. It appears the deceased opened the door to reach further out of the window for payment purposes. We're not sure if the vehicle lurched forward or what happened, but he became pinned between the door frame and the drive-thru window. A McDonald's employee tried to save the man by vaulting through the passenger side of the car, but was unsuccessful in his effort to free Dickinson. That employee also got injured in the rescue attempt. There's a major investigation still going on to see if they can figure out what happened. Well, Dickinson's right leg was actually amputated in 2021, his daughter wrote on Facebook, adding he was fitted with a prosthetic a few months later and relearned how to walk. She didn't make any comment about why his leg was removed. Well, his family remembered his love on their first Christmas without him, recounting his willingness to help and be there when it mattered most. Well, apparently, no place is safe. Well, you've heard about football fanatics. Well, a Florida man killed his wife and shot his stepdaughter over an NFL game argument before he committed suicide. I know a lot of people who live and breathe football. I stopped doing that when I quit playing it. But this man shot and killed his wife and shot his stepdaughter earlier this week before fatally shooting himself after an argument over an NFL game. Jason Kinney, 47, took his own life hours after killing his wife, Crystal Kinney, on December 22nd. That's according to the Polk County Sheriff, Grady Judd. Judd said the murder occurred after Crystal Kinney suggested to her husband that he turn off Monday's NFL game between the San Francisco 49ers and Indianapolis Colts. He'd been drinking and the argument escalated, prompting his wife to call her 12-year-old son to go call 911. Boy ran to a neighbor's house when he heard gunshots. Responding deputies found Crystal Kinney dead, and 13-year-old girl had been shot in the shoulder and the face. She's in the hospital recovering. She said, I begged him, don't shoot me, don't shoot me, don't shoot me, and he shot me anyway. Well, the boy wasn't harmed, as was Jason and Crystal's 1-year-old daughter, who was home at the time of the shooting. She was found by deputies asleep in her crib. After the shooting, Jason Kenney fled and called his sister, who lives in upstate New York. He said he'd told her he had done something wrong, and it'd be the last time they'd talk. Then he drove over to his father's house, where deputies found him. And as the deputies attempted to get him out of a shed, he shot himself. During a search of the family's home, deputies found a note Crystal wrote to her husband urging him to get help. The note said, "You're drinking, using cocaine again. It's not the way the family should be. You need God." Well, he's now gone to see him, I guess. Well, a trio of Palestinians was arrested for allegedly torching a Christmas tree at a Catholic church on the West Bank. 3 Palestinians were arrested on accusations of lighting a Christmas tree on fire and damaging part of a nativity scene at a Catholic church in the Israeli-occupied West Bank city of Jenin. The Palestinian Authority police announced the attack happened at about 3 o'clock in the morning Monday. Palestinian Authority police said Wednesday the 3 were taken into custody after a review of surveillance footage targeting the Holy Redeemer Church of Jenin. Tools believed to have been used in the attack were seized from the suspects. Police condemned the apparent attempt to incite sectarian and religious tensions on the West Bank. The church shared photos on social media showing the skeleton of a synthetic Christmas tree that had been cleared of the green plastic branches, and red and gold ornaments were scattered across the courtyard. The torched tree was quickly cleaned up by the church, which erected a new one the day after the attack in time for Christmas Mass. Church held a special ceremony at local Muslim and Christian Christian leaders and politicians in attendance. The Reverend Amir Jubran, the local priest at the church, said the arson was an isolated incident and emphasized the city's unity. Well, they may try to pretend there's unity, but clearly there's not. Well, travelers are being warned about a dangerous airplane sleeping position that's actually gaining popularity. There's a viral TikTok trend claiming to offer better sleep on airplanes, and that's raising alarms over passenger safety. A video showed passengers pulling their feet onto their seats and securing their legs with a seatbelt while trying to sleep during flights. That position sparked debate about comfort and etiquette and potential health risk. The trend has drawn mixed reactions across social media. Some users questioned whether the position will actually be comfortable. Others raised safety concerns. Several TikTok users said that position wasn't allowed by flight crews, noting that flight attendants intervened when they tried it on board the plane. Well, I've got some nice sleep on some flights. Well, the new U.S. military generation AI tool is a critical first step in the future of warfare, according to experts. The recently launched Generation AI tool for U.S. service members and Department of War workers is a critical first step in the future of warfare, according to a military expert. This month, the Pentagon announced the launch of GenAI.mil, a military-focused AI platform powered by Google Gemini. Secretary of War Hegseth said the platform is designed to give U.S. military personnel direct access to AI tools to help revolutionize the way we win. On Monday, the Department of War also announced the Pentagon is further integrating Elon Musk's XAI Grok family of models into the Generation AI platform. That allows employees to use XAI safely on secure government systems for routine work, including tasks involving sensitive but unclassified information. After taking this course that I took from Tony Robbins' organization, AI's got a lot to be said for it. Well, according to Secretary Turner, home ownership is making a comeback thanks to President Trump, but there's still more to come. In his recent address to the American people, President Trump said 11 months ago, "I inherited a mess and I'm fixing it." When it comes to the border, he inherited a catastrophe. Border security became a joke under the Biden administration, which allowed millions of illegal aliens to rush into our country. President Obama promised $50,000 in benefits to anybody who wanted to come. Of course, it wasn't his money. It was taxpayer money. This travesty didn't only make a mockery of our laws, it also increased demand for affordable housing, which in turn increased housing costs for American families. Recent Department of Housing and Urban Development report revealed that foreign-born migrants accounted for 2/3 of the growth in rental demand across the country. Some places, like in California and New York, there was 100% growth in migrant-fueled rental demand. And outrageously, some illegals even got HUD's housing help, siphoning taxpayer dollars away from American citizens. Under President Trump's leadership, HUD is actually ending this insanity. Taxpayer dollars ought to go to help taxpayers. Well, there's a holiday message for those carrying heavy hearts. The holidays are often called the most wonderful time of the year, but for many of folks, it's also the hardest. As families gather for dinners and services and celebrations, countless Americans will do so carrying the quiet ache of loss. Erica Kirk will face that reality this year, marking the season without her husband Charlie. The lights and the laughter and the traditions will all feel different. Of course, she's not alone. Across the nation, families will set one less place at the table, hang one less stocking, or hear one less familiar voice. Some folks are going to grieve a recent loss, and others will feel the echo of one that never fades. Well, unfortunately, seeds of violence have been shown to a lot of families over the years. And this time of year, it's especially poignant. Well, from Prince Andrew to Megxile, biggest royal family bombshells of 2025 are certainly in the news. And the British royal family can't seem to escape controversy. 2025, the monarchy weathered one of its most headline-grabbing years yet. King Charles III continued treatment for his undisclosed form of cancer. Family tension simmered in public view, long-running rifts refused to mend, and several royals unexpectedly found themselves thrust under the media spotlight. One even suffered a dramatic fall from grace, lost his title entirely. Well, Andrew, formerly known as a prince, is now just a commoner like everybody else. He was the Queen's favorite, but not the King's. Well, Sarah Ferguson, formerly known as Duchess of York, allegedly brought her daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, to visit Jeffrey Epstein after his release from jail in 2009. You know, Epstein, even though he's been dead for some time, is still front and center in the news in a lot of areas. Well, if you enjoyed Christmas Vacation, and I enjoyed the movie, Beverly D'Angelo, who played the mother, admits to an unscripted moment with Chevy Chase and actually made movie history. And this is certainly the time of year to watch that movie. And let's see if there's anything else worth talking about. Well, Representative Jasmine Crockett can't seem to keep her mouth out of the news. She's accusing President Trump of dishonesty about his success in shutting down undocumented immigrants crossing the border. She said he's lying about his success. And in the story that I find funny and fascinating, man dressed as a Santa Claus was pulled over in Ohio. The older couple dressed as St. Nick and Ms. Claus pulled over for speeding in Ohio while traveling to visit their daughter. The deputy with Fulton County Sheriff's Office approached the vehicle and immediately became starstruck. He's being heard on his body cam footage saying, "Santa?" Well, the man dressed as St. Nick looked up at the officer and said, I want to tell you, I got a concealed carry permit. I got a concealed weapon. And the deputy said, Santa has a CCW? Times are tough. Santa Claus said, well, you got to protect yourself. So he checked the driver's license and explained he pulled him over for speeding. Santa Claus got out of the car and said, well, look, I'm over 100 years old. Well, the deputy laughed and said, well, slow your speed down. And then he let him go. But when even Santa Claus has to carry a weapon, you know times are tough. Well, on that note, we're going to turn to our topic for today. We're going to talk about unsolved true crime. And we've talked about that in a lot of shows. In this particular one, the actually comes from Britain. According to Deputy Assistant Commissioner John Yates in the Metropolitan Police Force, this was one of the most deplorable episodes in the entire history of the Metropolitan Police Service. Talk about the murder of Daniel Morgan. It's one of the most investigated cases in British criminal history. So far, there have been 5 police investigations into his murder. There have been numerous arrests and even a failed prosecution. But the case still remains shrouded in confusion and conjecture and allegations and rumor. I'm talking about the murder of an unassuming private detective in a dark corner of a pub car park in March of 1987. It's just one strand of a dark, complex web involving links between corrupt and pedophilic police officers, multi-billionaire media moguls, and organized crime and political figures at the highest level. Whenever anybody's gotten close to the truth, it's alleged that one or possibly even all of these groups have attempted to interfere in the process of justice so that the murder of Daniel Morgan has never officially been solved. It's complex, labyrinthine tale spanning 3 decades of deceit and lies and corruption. So at this point, we're going to look at the facts and see if we can expose the corrupt web binding the dark forces at the heart of the British establishment that have tried so hard to obscure the truth. You know, if you look at the things that are going on in the news in Britain right now, it's clear they got issues with their legal system. Now, this whole case revolves around a man named Daniel Morgan, born on the Thursday, the 3rd of November, 1949, on the island of Singapore. Born premature, born with a club foot that would eventually leave him with 1 foot smaller than the other and the very slightest of limps. He was actually the son of the youngest ever captain in the British Army. His father was a war hero, member of the parachute regiment, and been held as a POW during World War II. When Daniel was 1 year old, his family moved back to his parents' native Monmouthshire in Wales so that Daniel could receive the correct orthopedic care for his deformed foot. This left Daniel wearing a caliper on his left leg from the age of 3 until he was about 10. And in the intervening years, he got several operations on his leg and foot to try and correct the deformity. Now, Daniel was described as a bright child and almost eidetic memory. His brother Alistair later recalled how as a child, Daniel could remember pages of facts from the Guinness Book of World Records. And that skill would certainly set Daniel in good stead for his future career as a private detective. 1950, he passed his 11-plus exam, was sent to the local grammar school. And he passed his O-levels, went on to agricultural college, and it seemed he was set to live a quiet country lifestyle, very different to the dangerous life of a big city private eye that he would ultimately end up living. Part of his studies, he spent a year in Denmark, getting practical experience in farming with his almost perfect power of recall, enabling him to easily learn the local language. After 12 months in Denmark, he came back to the Welsh village of Usk, where he met his wife, Iris. Couple settled down into domestic bliss and had 2 children, Sarah and Daniel Jr. After several years living in the idyllic countryside, the couple decided to move to the bright lights of London, where Daniel wanted to fulfill his dream of being a private detective. Began working for a private detective and bailiff company called Madigan's and Company, based in Croydon. And it was there that he met a garrulous, rambunctious, and friendly young man 5 years his junior by the name of Jonathan Rees. Well, in 1983, Daniel decided to leave Madigan's and start his own private investigating company. To do this, he bought an office in Thornton Heath in South London and began to hire office staff and bailiffs and people with the necessary skills to repossess cars. And business, of course, was exceedingly good. Business soon started turning over £150,000 a year. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $600,000 a year, which is nothing to sneeze at, let me tell you. Pretty soon, Daniel was able to trade his rented car for a brand new BMW coupe with a car phone, and by the time of his death, his growing income from the detective agency allowed Daniel to own 3 top-of-the-range sports cars and an old clapped-out Sportster. And that latter car Daniel was slowly restoring in his spare time and hoped to give to his daughter when she was old enough to drive. He loved his cars and was a member of several classic car appreciation societies. Well, in 1984, Jonathan Rees was sacked by Madigan's due to his drinking habits. Bosses at Madigan's felt that Rees spent more time in the pub than at his desk. There were also rumors that Rees had fabricated evidence and lied in police statements and under oath in order to ensure cases ended in his client's favor. Well, Rees approached Daniel and persuaded him to take him on as an extra pair of hands at his agency. Part of Daniel's reasoning for giving Rees a second chance was that Rees had lots of contacts within the Metropolitan Police to be useful to the company's investigations. Well, Rees appeared to put his old boozy ways behind him, and Daniel asked Rees if he'd like to invest some money in the company and become a partner in the firm. Well, Rees was only too eager to accept that opportunity and happily became Daniel's business partner. And together they renamed the company Southern Investigations. Well, this dark and twisted tale that had led to Daniel Morgan's murder began with an armed robbery at the Belmont car auctions in February 1986. That auction house was based on Penhall Road in Charlton, on the south bank of the River Thames. One fateful night that February, the staff of the Belmont car auctions were held up at gunpoint and £20,000 in cash and checks were taken. This would equate to about £60,000, adjusted for inflation. One of the owners of Belmont Car Auctions, Michael Thorne, contacted his cousin, Detective Alan Purvis, and asked him for help and advice. Purvis, in turn, spoke to his superior, Acting Inspector Sid Fillery. Fillery had been temporarily promoted from the rank of detective sergeant to take charge of the regional crime squad at Catford Police Station. He was a 20-year veteran in the Metropolitan Police Force and was seen as a bit of a legend by his fellow officers and local gangsters alike. Both groups referred to him as the King of Catford. Well, Fillery told Purvis his cousin should hire the services of a private security company called Southern Investigations that was co-owned by his good friend Jonathan Rees. After a meeting between Michael Thorne and his business partner, Walter Pinford, it was agreed that every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, Southern Investigations would be responsible for collecting and taking from that evening car auctions and everything that was brought in and seeing that it was safely deposited in the Midland Bank 2 miles away on Lehigh Road. Well, to fulfill this duty, Jonathan Rees hired the services of his own brother-in-law, 27-year-old drug dealer by the name of Gary Vane, and a debt collector whose services Southern Investigations used by the name of John Peacock. Sid Fillery also agreed that he, Alan Purvis, another police officer called Detective Constable Peter Foley, would assist Southern Investigations by mulling around the audience of the car auctions in plain clothes and try and spy out any known criminals that may have been casing the auction house. On Tuesday, the 18th of March, 1986, Jonathan Rees telephoned John Peacock and told him the services would not be required the next evening. Rees told Peacock that Belmont Car Auctions was unwilling to pay for so many men to be involved, as it was essentially a simple security operation. Now, this was a lie. Rees had in fact arranged for his other brother-in-law, 29-year-old career criminal Glenn Vane, to take Peacock's place. Reeves made further changes to the usual plans, and then he decided to personally collect the takings from the auction house and deposit them in the bank himself. Well, on Wednesday, the 19th of March, 1986, Reeves and Glenn and Gary Vienne collected the takings from Belmont Car Auctions as arranged, made their way to the Midland Bank on Lehigh Road to discover the lock on the night safe had been superglued shut. Lees claims he called the Belmont Car Auction House several times to ask for new instructions, but didn't get any reply to his calls. Of course, there's no record of these calls ever having been made. In fact, the staff at the auction house informed the police they were in the office till the early hours in the morning and didn't get any phone calls at all. Reason made the decision to take the takings home with him and keep them overnight till he could take them to the bank when it opened the next morning. Well, according to the story, Reeves dropped Vians, that's Vians, off home and drove to his own house, where he was quickly accosted at the end of the garden path. Reeves alleged he had ammonia sprayed in his eyes, and his assailants made off with £18,280 in cash and checks. That's roughly 55,000 pounds to adjust for inflation. When police attended Reeves' home to interview him, they noted the ammonia was only on his shirt, not on his face. Wasn't in the least bit disheveled and displayed no signs of physical injury from the attack. Reeves was also reluctant to answer the police's questions. And Reeves' wife, Sharon Ann, was so unconcerned by her husband's alleged violent assault, she went to bed halfway through her husband's police interview. Detective Constable Duncan Hanrahan noted in his police book after his interview that with Reeves he considered this more a straightforward robbery, some kind of inside job. Michael Thorne and Walter Penfold were unconvinced by Reeves' story and instructed the company's solicitors to send letters to Jonathan Reeves, Sid Fillery, Alan Purvis, and Peter Foley, informing them they were being sued as part of a civil complaint. This placed the three police officers in an extremely injudicious position. Also started a rift between Daniel Morgan and Jonathan Reeves and instigated Daniel's suspicions that his business partner was up to far more serious crimes than just arranging phony robberies. There were suspicions that possibly led to Daniel's murder. Well, by early 1987, Daniel was quietly telling his wife and some of the more trusted employees of Southern Investigations he was thinking about buying Jonathan Reeves out of the company. It wasn't just the accusations of corruption that had irked Daniel, but Reeves didn't seem to be pulling his weight anymore and had gone back to his old behaviors of spending most of his time in the pub, boozing it up with numerous contacts he had with the police. By this point, Daniel Morgan had learned not to trust the Metropolitan Police. According to Alistair Morgan, Daniel didn't hold the police in very high regard, didn't trust them, and grown not to like Lee's close associated with him. Well, the relationship between Daniel and Reeves was also exacerbated by the fact that both men were having an affair with the same woman. Well, Daniel and Reeves were involved with a 38-year-old married mother by the name of Margaret Harrison. Now, there was clearly some duplicity going on for both Reeves and Harrison, and had denied to Daniel that they were bedfellows. But Daniel had heard from multiple sources Harrison had confessed that she was bedding both the partners of Southern Investigations. And it was said by the office staff at Southern Investigations that Daniel becomes so jealous about sharing his lever with Reeves, he took to trawling the local pub car parks looking for Reeves' car so he could confront the pair if he found them together. From early 1987, tensions between Daniel Morgan and Jonathan Reeves had reached a boiling point. Growing animosity between the pair spilled over into open hostility, and allowed arguments between Daniels and Reeves and the Vian brothers occurred outside the Hart Public House in Thornton Heath. During an argument, Daniel was overheard telling the dubious trio he knew that they'd planned and carried out the Belmont car auction robbery, and he wanted Reeves out of the business. Well, on Thursday, the 10th of February, 1987, Daniel returned from Malta, where he'd been investigating a gang of car thieves transporting stolen high-end rental cars from London to Lebanon via Malta. Told his brother that the Maltese mafia was involved. He'd solved the case by paying off corrupt Maltese officials and police officials. Daniel appeared to be a little cagey after his return, as if something was deeply troubling him. Went to dinner with Margaret Harrison at a restaurant called the Mythos. Daniel had appeared to be distracted, almost acting as if he was frightened by something or someone. During that meal, he told Margaret that he was a marked man. On Thursday, the 5th of March, 1987, Southern Investigations was ordered to pay £10,000 compensation to Michael Thorne and Walter Penfold for the Belmont car auction robbery. When Daniel Morgan was told about the financial hit the company was about to take, it solidified his belief that Jonathan Rees had to go. Shortly after 9 p.m. on Monday, the 9th of March, 1987, Daniel Morgan met with Jonathan Rees and acting Detective Inspector Sid Fillery at the Golden Lion Public House in Sydenham. 5 other off-duty police officers drinking in the Golden Lion that night, and they all witnessed Daniel Morgan, Jonathan Rees, and Sid Fillery having a heated argument with raised voices. Sid Fillery would later claim that the argument had been over the arming of British police officers, whereas Jonathan Rees remembered it being over the merits of different classic cars. More than likely, the argument was over the Belmont car auction robbery and Daniel's belief that Fillery and the small group of his police officers had helped Jonathan Rees to plan and orchestrate the criminal enterprise. On the morning of Tuesday, the 10th of March, 1987, Jonathan Rees told one of the staff at Southern Investigations, a man named David Bray, had another meeting planned with Sid Fillery that evening at the Golden Lion. Rees said that he didn't want to take Daniel to that meeting, but didn't have any other choice. This all sounded rather official and serious, and not the simple occasion of friends drinking it up in the pub for him. That is, after all, what both Sid Fillery and Jonathan Rees will later make out the meetings on the 9th and 10th of March have been about. Daniel spent the day traveling around talking to new prospective clients. Came back to the office about 5 p.m. We got 1,100 pounds from Malcolm Webb, one of the bailiffs employed by an investigation agency. It was too late for Daniel to deposit that money in the bank. The officers of Southern Investigation had been burgled some weeks before, so Daniel decided to take that 1,100 pounds with him. When he left the premises, he was also seen to be carrying 3 or 4 beige-colored folders that he collected from his office. After leaving Southern Investigations, Daniel went for a quick drink with Margaret Harrison at a local wine bar before getting on to the meeting at the Golden Lion. Well, that second meeting at the Golden Lion between Daniel Morgan and Jonathan Rees and Sid Fillery commenced about 7:30 that evening. Daniel was slightly late, arriving at about 7:45. No parking available in front of the pub, so Daniel was forced to park in a dark, secluded car park at the rear of the Golden Lion. Fillery had taken a table at the back of the saloon bar. A busy night at the pub with the last remaining mourners from awake, drinking themselves silly, and a darts match was taking place upstairs. All in all, police later traced 84 people who were drinking in the pub that evening, and of these witnesses, 51 remembered seeing Daniel and Rees and Fillery. Several witnesses remembered seeing Daniel writing notes during that meeting. Whatever he wrote was never recovered by police later. Several witnesses also remembered seeing 2 men loitering outside and peering in through a window at the back of the pub. Rees was seen leaving the Golden Lion shortly before 9 p.m., and Daniel was seen talking to Fillery for a few minutes after that, leaving the Golden Lion a little after 9, buying 2 packets of crisp that's potato chips, folks, from the bar as he went. We know that after leaving the Golden Lion, Jonathan Rees got into his car and immediately received a phone call from an untraceable number. That call came in at 9:04 p.m. and lasted for 12 minutes. The minute that call ended, Rees made a call himself, again to an untraceable number. That call lasted 2 minutes. Then he made a second telephone call at about 9:19 to his wife, Sharon. Then at 9:21, Rees got a call from Paul Goodridge, a celebrity bodyguard and relative of the Van family through marriage. After this series of phone calls, Rees stated he drove to the Balula Spa public house on Balula Hill in Norwood, where he had a drink with Goodridge. Well, the BBC sound engineer by the name of Thomas Terry had decided to forego the delights of the famed and star-studded BBC bar at Shepherd's Bush's television center, decided instead to make a call in at the Golden Lion on his way home. Pulled his car into that secluded and darkened car park at the back of the pub at about 9:40 p.m., and his headlights hit on something that first thought to be a mannequin abandoned between a top-of-the-range BMW and a Morris Marina estate wagon. He parked his car and went to have a closer look. What he found was Daniel Morgan laying dead next to his car. A 14-inch axe was embedded in his face, and a large pool of blood had formed under his body. Next to Daniel's body were those 2 packets of crisp he had bought and his car keys. And his right trouser leg had been split open from the pocket to the knee, and the notes he had made at the meeting with Rees and Fillery and the files he'd been seen carrying earlier in the evening were gone. Well, Terry rushed to the pub and told the barman, Joseph O'Brien, about his discovery. O'Brien returned with Terry to the scene of the crime and checked Daniel for signs of life. Finding none, he returned Terry to the bar where O'Brien landed at nearby Catford police station. At 9:50 that evening, police constable Jeffrey Vaughn arrived at the scene, established that Daniel was well and truly dead, and then PC Vaughn set up a police perimeter and contacted Catford police station, instructed him to send out the criminal investigation department and the police surgeon. Now, considering that Catford police station was less than a 5-minute walk from the Golden Lion pub, it took the CID officers an inordinate amount of time to travel between the two locations because it was over an hour before any other police officers arrived at the scene. Police surgeon Dr. Angus Baines was the next person to arrive, getting to the scene of the murder about 10:55 p.m., 10 minutes before any other CID officer arrived. At 11:05, Detective Sergeant Malcolm Davidson arrived, and 5 minutes later, after Davidson, his superiors arrived. Deputy Inspector Alan Jones and Detective Superintendent Douglas Campbell. Now, why it took CID over an hour to arrive at the scene of the crime and take over from the solitary uniformed officer has never been explained by anybody to anybody. There's been other strange and unexplained occurrences at the scene of the murder that night. Police photographer Michael Rhodes took photographs of what appeared to be fingerprints on the driver's side door of the Daniels car. But when forensic officer Malcolm Reynolds came to examine those fingerprints, they'd been wiped away. Forensic scenes of crime officer Leonard Flint was told by Superintendent Campbell that there were no police exhibit officers available and that evidence being taken from the scene wasn't being properly logged in, and there was no reliable chain of custody. It was the perfect environment for any evidence that might incriminate corrupt police officers to disappear. Flint then watched his police officers remove the 1,100 pounds Daniels had taken from Malcolm Webb from Daniels' trouser pocket and also take an expensive Rolex watch from his wrist. Now, Flint's recollections of this event turned out to be very important because the police later claimed that the Rolex was never recovered from the scene and its theft was the possible motive for the murder. We can be certain that Flint's recollection of the event is correct, as he remembered immediately coming to the conclusion robbery could not have been a motive for this murder, as these high-value items would have surely been taken. And Flint also remembered police officers searching Daniel's car and removing files and paperwork. Well, none of this paperwork was ever logged in as being found by the police, and none of it's ever been seen since. Well, at midnight, Detective Inspector Jones arrived at the home of Jonathan Rees. Jones would later say he felt like Rees had been expecting him, still fully dressed and awake despite the lateness of the hour. And as Jones told Rees about Daniel's murder, Jones didn't like the way Rees' wife Sharon didn't react to that horrific news. She simply sat and stared at the television. According to D.I. Jones, neither Jonathan nor Sharon Rees expressed any shock or surprise at the news of Daniel's murder. The only emotion Jonathan Rees showed was a display of off-color humor when Rees was asked to come to the police station and answer some further questions, surrender his clothes for analysis. Supposedly he replied to the officer, "Who do you think I am, the Axeman of Catford?" Seems nobody picked up on the point that no one had officially informed Jonathan Rees that Daniel had been murdered using an axe at this point in time. At the Catford police station, Jonathan Rees was informally asked some questions over the course of about an hour and a half by Detective Superintendent Douglas Campbell. And the questions covered everything from the nature of Southern Investigation's business and its clients, and this work had made Daniel any enemies, to Rees' fractious relationship with Daniel. While being asked these questions, Rees' clothes were put under forensic scrutiny, but no traces of blood was ever discovered. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Jonathan Rees accompanied police constables Lawrence Hart and Detective Constable Noel Cosgrove to Daniel's home, where Iris Morgan was informed about her husband's murder. Jonathan Rees later swore in an affidavit that upon hearing the news, Iris Morgan remained composed and said, "I knew they were going to hurt him. Never thought they'd go this far." Well, Hart and Cosgrove vehemently disagreed with Rees' recollection, stated Iris broke down into tears and stated between sobs, "Why would anybody do such a thing?" Well, on the morning of Wednesday, the 11th of March, 1987, something completely inappropriate happened. Acting Detective Inspector Sid Fillery was assigned to the investigation. Now, Fillery was a central witness to that crime, having been with Daniel Morgan just minutes before his murder. There was more animosity between the pair, which with them having had a blazing row in public just 24 hours before the murder. This later point alone should have been made Fillory a person of interest in the inquiry. Unfortunately, the senior investigators on the inquiry didn't know about Fillory's links with either Daniel Morgan or Jonathan Rees, and Fillory didn't disclose them. As a result, Sid Fillory played a central part in the murder investigation in those first few crucial days. And this period was labeled during questions in Parliament the golden days, where Fillory was alleged to have subverted and attempted to derail the investigation. At 9:30 in the morning, Fillory arrived at the Office of the Southern Investigation with Detective Constable Stephen Thorogood. They began to search through Daniel's belongings, and according to the staff of Southern Investigations, 2 officers walked away with a great big bin bag of files and paperwork. One of the files that Fillory specifically asked to see and took with him when he left was on the Belmont car auction robbery, and Daniel's diary is also discovered to be missing after this search. Now, there was no record of what was taken in this search ever made, and both officers involved in the search would later deny they left the office with any paperwork whatsoever. Well, as the unauthorized search of Southern Investigations unfolded, pathologist Dr. Michael Heath carried out the autopsy. Daniel had been struck 5 times in the head with the axe. 4 of those strikes had deeply penetrated the skull and were later proven to be fatal. 3 strikes had been done to the back of the head, indicating the attacker had struck from behind. This assertion was supported by the fact that Daniel had no defensive wounds on his body. There was a bruise on the back left-hand side of Daniel's head that probably had been caused when he fell to the ground and banged his head on the concrete floor. The final axe blow had been to Daniel's face, and the axe had been penetrated so deep that the skull had been severed from the brainstem. Heath estimated the attack would have taken no more than 5 or 6 seconds, and that from the pattern of the injuries, it was more than likely the police were looking for a left-handed killer. Meanwhile, Jonathan Rees spent the morning telling everybody he met that Daniel had been killed in a botched and fatal mugging. The killer had used either a knife or a machete. Rees told this lie to the staff at Southern Investigations. The solicitor Michael Goodridge, and most importantly, Daniel's brother, Alistair Morgan. Rees then went to Catford Police Station, where he gave his first official police statement to his good friend, said Fillory. If you look at this in the most cynical of lights, the event could be construed as 2 key witnesses and the de facto prime suspects to the murder, making sure they were both keeping to the same story. Well, ensuring they didn't contradict each other. And it is interesting to note, maybe of great importance in Rees' witness statement, failed to mention that Sid Fillory had been at the meeting with Daniel Morgan just moments before he died. That statement later be criticized for being noticeable for its brevity and inadequate for a murder investigation. After taking Rees' statement, Fillory took Rees to Lewiston Police Mortuary to formally identify Daniel's body. Later that day, Sid Fillory had a meeting with Alistair Morgan. Alistair told Fillory he should look into the robbery at the Belmont car auction, as this had played heavily on Daniel's mind before his death. Alistair had a hunch that solving that mystery of the car auction robbery would be the key to solving Daniel's murder. Well, Fillory tried to persuade Alistair he was barking up the wrong tree and he should leave it to the police to decide what leads to follow. Flying against convention, no notes of this interview were made by Fillory. Of course, Alistair Morgan had no idea at this point that Daniel had suspected Fillory of planning the robbery with Jonathan Rees. Later that day, Alistair Morgan had a telephone conversation with Detective Inspector Alan Jones, where he once again stated he believed the Belmont car auction robbery was the key to solving their murder. A short while after Alistair's conversation with D.I. Jones, Fillory telephoned the Morgan family and told them that they should persuade Alistair Morgan to return to his home in Hampshire, as he was interfering with the murder investigation, was muddying the waters. Well, the sad thing is other police officers decided that Jonathan Rees was somehow involved in Daniel's murder. He had both the motive and the opportunity. And he could easily have hung around the Golden Lion's darkened car park for Daniel to return to his car, murdered him, and then return to his own car to make and receive that flurry of phone calls that occurred over the next 20 minutes. Now, the motive could have been jealousy at sharing a lover with Daniel Morgan, or Daniel's growing suspicion that Rees had been involved in the planning of the Belmont car auction robbery. Later that day, Sid Fillory was tasked with bringing Jonathan Rees into the incident room at Sydenham Police Station, where he had to be fingerprinted and his BMW forensically examined. Well, as the car was being examined, Fillery had another off-the-record conversation with Reeves at the Crown Public House by Bromley Common. According to witnesses, Fillery and Reeves were joined by detectives Peter Foley and Alan Purvis, the two other police officers involved in the security of the Belmont car auction house. That meeting was set up at such short notice and of such a high importance to the four men that Purvis had called his commanding officer, telling him he was sick and wouldn't be coming into work. Well, the sad thing is, throughout this entire process, active police officers were involved in suppressing any and all evidence that would point to who the guilty parties might be. Well, shortly after that secret meeting, among those officers, Superintendent Campbell discovered Sid Fillery had met with Daniel Morgan the night before his murder, but had failed to declare that. As a result of that revelation, Jonathan Reeves was interviewed without Sid Fillery being present. After the interview, Reeves was watched getting into his car and immediately phoning somebody using his car phone. An enterprising police officer immediately snatched up the nearest phone and telephoned Sid Fillery, and lo and behold, his number was engaged. The assumption was that Reeves had telephoned Fillery to apprise him of what was said during that interview. Fillery was subsequently invited to make an official police statement. He duly admitted to his commanding officer he had been with Daniel Morgan and Jonathan Reeves the night before the murder. Failed to mention the meeting he'd attended with Daniel and Reeves the following evening, that had ended just moments before Daniel's murder. Next day, Fillery was asked to stand down for the investigation. He agreed and immediately went on annual leave. Well, as you can see, this murder investigation was not your standard murder investigation. When the likely culprits were solved to be the investigators, you really couldn't think that anything was going to come out of it. Well, on that note, we're going to close out this farce of a police investigation. I've seen similar activity among officers here in various places I've lived. On that note, we've run out of time. I hope y'all enjoyed this story. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show, and hope y'all had a very Merry Christmas, and we'll see you on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend.